2 inches green explosive killing talisman? Xiao Yan's expression changed when he heard these words. He looked at the jade crystal cabinet in front of him with a thoughtful expression. The red explosive killing talisman was lying quietly in it. There seemed to be a faint light flashing on the paper talisman, giving it a mysterious feeling. Huala! The voice of the academy's elder had obviously attracted the attention of some other students. When they saw the young man in red robes, some of the stronger students frowned. Who is this person? I seem to have never seen him in the top 10 of the Soaring Dragon ranking. Not far away, a robust student whispered to his companion beside him. Although his voice was deliberately lowered, his muffled voice was still heard by many people. When Xiao Yan heard this, he also looked curiously at the young man in red robes. At this moment, the latter's back was facing everyone. He didn't know what the young man looked like, but judging from his behavior. Obviously, he wasn't shocked by the 120,000 spirit origin stones. He calmly took out a red card. This card was the spirit origin card that stored the spirit origin stone. The energy within the spirit origin stone could be fully poured into it. When cultivating in the spirit origin array, one only needed to pour the energy within into the groove. Xiao Yan looked at the spirit origin card in the young man's hand and mused for a moment. He had also heard from Elder Fang that those who possessed this spirit origin card were elite students from the inner academy. Since this fellow was not in the top 10 of the Soaring Dragon ranking, it was likely that his strength was definitely not ordinary to possess a spirit origin card. Thank you, Elder. When the elder in front of him swiped away the 120,000 spirit origin stones on the spirit origin, the young man politely thanked him. He put away the green explosive killing talisman and left. A solemnness suddenly appeared between Xiao Yan's brows as he watched the young man leave. He had actually sensed a rare heat from this fellow. This kind of feeling was something that he had not felt for many years. Elder Wang, who is this guy? After the young man left, the muscular young man who spoke earlier stepped forward and asked. Elder Wang was obviously very familiar with the muscular young man. After hearing this, he pondered for a moment before saying in a somewhat strange manner, "Strange. Why does he have so many spirit origin stones? In the past few months, he hasn't been seen among the people who handed in the mission." Shaking his head, Elder Wang shook his head and said, "His name is Btth2. He is ranked 15th on the Soaring Dragon ranking, and his strength is considered average. This time, he used so many years' worth of spirit origin stones to exchange for a green explosive killing talisman. It seems like he is determined to win this competition." The burly young man smiled when he heard this. He crossed his arms over his chest and said, "Although the green explosive killing talisman is powerful, it can only be used once. How can it be so easy to enter the top 10 of the Soaring Dragon ranking?" After listening to the conversation between the two, Xiao Yan also shifted his gaze away from the red explosive killing talisman in front of him. This youth called Btth2 actually gave him an inexplicable feeling. Shaking his head, he threw away the thoughts in his mind. Xiao Yan continued to wander around the main hall. Sure enough, there were countless good things inside. Xiao Yan even saw a few heavenly cores placed at the highest point. Each of them had a price tag of no less than 100,000 spirit origin stones. Seeing this, Xiao Yan's heart suddenly moved. He had not used the 5 holy rank trials that he had obtained back then because of the holy rank trial. According to Xuan and Kai Lin, wouldn't they be able to be used to exchange for spirit origin stones? Xiao Yan was secretly delighted when this thought appeared. The thought of shrinking his hand back earlier had also disappeared. Although heavenly cores were incomparably precious, they were currently useless to him. It would naturally be best if 5 heavenly cores could be exchanged for nearly 600,000 spirit origin stones. Xiao Yan relaxed his heart. He did not bother too much about it. He began to pay attention to some expensive treasures. The competition was near. Besides him, he also had to make some preparations for Xuan and the others. "Xiao Yan, let's go inside a little." Just as he was slowly walking around, Xiao Yan's heart suddenly moved. The Xiaoao's voice urgently sounded in his mind. Xiao Yan lifted his eyebrows and looked around with an expressionless face. When he saw that no one was paying attention, he casually walked over. Under the reminder of the Xiaoao, Xiao Yan took out a red copper ball that was the size of a longan from a jade crystal cabinet in the large hall. "What is this?" Xiao Yan held the copper ball in his hand and curiously looked at it a couple of times. However, he did not recognize it. This is a good thing. It is called Star Moon Immortal Copper, one of the 5 great immortal copper. If I add this into the weapon I forged for your wife Kai Lin, it will definitely reach the level of a heavenly weapon. The Xiaoao's anxious voice contained a rare excitement. Star Moon Immortal Copper? 5 immortal copper? Xiao Yan was startled for a moment. He looked at the copper ball in his hand once again. It was crimson red in color. Upon closer inspection, there was a faint light rotating in his hand. It was heavy in his hand. The 5 immortal coppers are the best materials to refine weapons. As far as I know, the 5 immortal coppers are the best materials to refine weapons. Some of the legendary sacred weapons were forged using the 5 immortal copper as the base material. Although you only have a little bit of the Star Moon Immortal Copper in your hand, you can still use it to strengthen your heavenly weapon. Hearing the Xiaoao's words, Xiao Yan's heart suddenly shook. Sacred weapons, this was a sacred item that was close to the legends. How could the so-called 5 immortal coppers be so powerful? But this thing, Xiao Yan took a deep breath. Without any hesitation, he held it in his hand and looked at the jade cabinet. Next to the place where the Star Moon's immortal copper was placed, there was a clear introduction: Star Moon's immortal copper, 100,000 spirit origin stones. There are still people in the academy who know what's good for them. Xiao Yan shook his head with a bitter smile. No wonder no one took it. An inconspicuous copper pill cost 100,000 spirit origin stones. Ordinary people really did not have the courage to buy it. Don't cry anymore. This is a material used to forge a sacred artifact. If it was placed in a large place, it would at least exceed a few 100 million monarch crystals. However, the Xiaoao smacked its lips and said, the failure rate of refining this isn't low either. If they can guarantee a 100% success rate in forging a heavenly weapon, those old fellows of the academy would definitely not be willing to take it out. Xiao Yan nodded his head silently. Since he could recognize it, this meant that the academy was clearly aware of the value of this thing and was willing to put it here. It also meant that they were not confident that they could use this to refine a heavenly weapon. Otherwise, up until now, he had never seen a divine weapon in the hall. A mere mid-grade spirit weapon was already close to 30 to 40,000. The price of a heavenly weapon was estimated to be more than 10 times that of a mid-grade spirit weapon. After keeping the Star Moon Immortal Copper, Xiao Yan walked to another place. The Star Moon Immortal Copper could only be said to be an unexpected harvest. The real purpose of this trip was to find if there were any medicinal ingredients that could be used to refine essence-protecting pills. According to the records of that senior, the medicinal ingredients needed to refine some essence-protecting pills were found by him in various regions. Although there are only a few of them, it is really difficult to find them here. After searching for a moment, Xiao Yan finally sighed helplessly. The medicinal ingredients here were considered extremely rare, but there were no medicinal ingredients used to refine essence-protecting pills. This caused Xiao Yan to be somewhat disappointed. Clenching the Star Moon Immortal Copper tightly in his hand, Xiao Yan shook his head. Just as he was about to leave, suddenly, a subtle feeling emerged from his body, and his facial expression changed. Xiao Yan slowly looked at the jade cabinet beside him. There was a jade bottle that was as black as ink in it. There were some inconspicuous small holes on the jade bottle. Under Xiao Yan's sharp senses, a vague feeling of extreme cold was emitted from it. It turned the glass of the jade cabinet into a thick layer of frost. 1 inch, what is it? Xiao Yan walked up to the jade cabinet with doubt in his heart. When he arrived in front of the jade cabinet, his body unconsciously felt a chill. A trace of surprise flashed across Xiao Yan's face. Upon closer inspection, he discovered that this jade crystal cabinet in front of him was different from the ones in other places. The one in front of him was even thicker. When he touched it with his hand, a spiritual light actually flowed on the surface of the jade crystal cabinet and knocked Xiao Yan's palm away. A formation has been deployed on this jade crystal cabinet to prevent the cold air from leaking out. You better not try to touch it. While Xiao Yan was praising the jade cabinet, a calm voice sounded behind him. Xiao Yan turned around and saw that it was the robust young man who had spoken to Elder Wang earlier. Formation? What's inside? Xiao Yan frowned and looked over. Due to the frost fog, the small words on the side of the jade bottle looked extremely blurry. The burly youth looked at Xiao Yan and said expressionlessly to this unfamiliar face, "This is the cold underworld water. It has an extremely yin attribute and is extremely harmful to cultivators below the emperor level. That is why it is sealed with a formation. Yin attribute? Xiao Yan was shocked when he heard this. He raised his eyebrows. He looked at the jade cabinet behind him again and his eyes began to show some excitement. When the robust young man saw this, he snorted coldly and said, "Don't think too much. The Academy has specifically said that no competition is allowed to use the frigid underworld water. Otherwise, this thing would have been bought by others a long time ago." At the end, the young man glanced at Xiao Yan. Just as he was about to leave, he suddenly turned around and said, "Moreover, that thing, ordinary people really can't afford it." After saying that, he casually left and went somewhere else. Xiao Yan mused for a moment. He looked at the jade crystal cabinet. Through the layers of frost, he seemed to be able to clearly see the price on the nameplate. 150,000 spirit origin stones. 150,000. Xiao Yan could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. This price was indeed able to force most people back. After musing for a moment, Xiao Yan still exhaled. His face twitched, and he finally made up his mind. He must buy this thing today. Since it belonged to the extreme yin attribute, he might be able to use it to neutralize the yang attribute of the burning spell while cultivating the yin scroll. After making up his mind, Xiao Yan no longer hesitated, and his mind began to stir. On him, adding this cold dark water and the previous star moon immortal copper, it was indeed impossible to buy 250,000 star moons. Thinking of this, Xiao Yan's expression changed. He looked at the storage ring in his hand. It just so happened that when he was in the capital of chaos, he and Yuan Tianmu had killed a leader of the Kangri group. According to the rules of the Yunluo Academy, killing those ranked on the fierce ranking would reward them accordingly. However, he didn't know if Li Yin's ranking was enough to exchange for the missing 50,000 spirit origin stones. When he arrived at the entrance of the main hall, Elder Wang was sitting on a chair and reading a thick book. Ever since the young man called Zhu Tianwo left, no one had used the spirit origin stone to exchange for items in half a day's time. This kind of job, for an ordinary and old elder like him, it was an extremely leisurely job. This student wants to exchange for the cold underworld water. I'll have to trouble Elder to take it out. Elder Wang's thoughts were thrown into disorder. He raised his head in dissatisfaction. When he saw Xiao Yan's appearance, he frowned. Clearly, he did not know the latter. Cold dark water? After hearing Xiao Yan's words, Elder Wang's expression turned slightly weird. The price of that thing was something that even he was a little afraid of. Why was this guy so rich? Let me make this clear first. The Academy forbids the use of the frigid underworld water during competitions. If we discover it once, not only you, but also me and myself will be severely punished. Elder Wang cleared his throat and spoke in a deep voice. The student knows. Xiao Yan touched the storage ring with his finger and said with a smile. Elder Wang opened his mouth and tried to calm himself down. He stared at Xiao Yan for a long time and said in a low voice, "Kid, in my impression, the experts in the inner courtyard's soaring dragon ranking do not have someone like you. 150,000 spirit origin stones, I advise you not to waste it." Xiao Yan smiled noncommittally when he heard this. He did not say anything. A bright light flashed in his hand and a spirit origin card appeared in his hand. He handed it to Elder Wang. Seeing Xiao Yan take out the spirit origin card, Elder Wang's face was filled with shock. He took the card and checked the amount. The huge amount of money even made him dizzy. Enough, enough. Elder Wang didn't know what to say. After returning the card to Xiao Yan, he stood up shakily. Just as he was about to leave the chair, Xiao Yan placed the Star Moon Immortal Copper on the table. There's also this thing. Count it in. Star Moon Immortal Copper. Seeing Xiao Yan taking out another treasure worth 100,000 spirit origin stones, Elder Wang almost lost his balance. These things that he thought were impossible to exchange for were actually taken by this young man in front of him today. This needs 250,000 spirit origin stones. Elder Wang's voice was slightly trembling. He had been the seller of the Spirit Pavilion for nearly 10 years, but he had never exchanged for such a huge amount of spirit origin stones in one go. I wonder how much this is worth? Xiao Yan nodded. His finger touched the storage ring. A head that had long ceased to have any aura fell onto the table. Seeing this head with a pale face, Elder Wang wasn't too surprised. He looked at it. Although it had been a long time, Xiao Yan had used a special method to preserve it, so he was able to recognize it. Some of the students were also attracted by Xiao Yan's actions. They stood in the distance and unconsciously looked over. When they saw the head on the table, their expressions became extremely interesting. He can kill the people on the fierce ranking. This guy really has some strength. The heads on the fierce ranking are also rewarded according to their strength. However, even the weakest of them can be exchanged for 10,000 spirit origin stones. Some of the students looked at Xiao Yan and said in a sour tone. With their strength, they didn't dare to go to Capital of Chaos and barge in. Every month, they would take the 100+ spirit origin stones distributed by the Academy and spend their days there. Even if they came to Spirit Pavilion, they would only dare to look at the things with the lowest price. Hiss. After recognizing the heads on the table, Elder Wang immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. It was his duty to remember the faces of everyone on the fierce ranking. It was also because of this that he could clearly identify who the head was. The leader of Kangri Group, Li Yin. He spoke while trembling. Elder Wang stared at Xiao Yan. His heart was filled with waves. Who was this guy? How could he kill Li Yin? Under the influence of his eyes, he had heard of Li Yin's name. As the most talented elder of Kangri Group, his strength had already reached the peak of the sovereign realm. How could he be defeated by this young man in front of him? Seeing Xiao Yan nodding his head indifferently, Elder Wang's hands trembled slightly. He took a deep breath and a message that he had heard from the other elders a few days ago suddenly flashed across his mind. The Saint Rank trial participant from a few years ago had arrived at the Academy a few days ago. You are. When he thought of this, Elder Wang's arrogance suddenly disappeared. His voice was trembling slightly. That's right, it's Li Yin. I heard that this guy is ranked pretty high in the fierce ranking. I wonder how many spirit origin stones he can exchange for. Elder Wang glanced at the indifferent Xiao Yan. After a moment of silence, he slowly stretched out 4 fingers and said, 400,000 spirit origin stones. 0 inches 400,000. Xiao Yan couldn't help but feel delighted when he heard this. It had really exceeded his expectations. Not only could he buy the Star Moon's immortal copper and cold underworld water, he could also buy another 150,000 spirit origin stones. You must be the Saint Rank trial participant that has caused a huge commotion these few days. After recovering from the shock, Elder Wang suddenly said in a low voice. Xiao Yan raised his brows when he heard this, and faintly nodded his head. As expected, Elder Wang took a deep breath and stored Li Yin's head into the storage ring. He stood up and said to Xiao Yan, "Please follow me." In his tone, there was no longer the tone of an elder when it came to students. Arriving in front of the jade cabinet where the cold abyss water was located, Elder Wang took out a paper talisman and used his finger to clamp the paper talisman. As the flame lingered, the paper talisman turned into ashes and dissipated. At the same time, a spiritual light shot out from the ashes and entered the jade cabinet. In an instant, waves of white fog rose from the jade cabinet. The moment the white fog rose, Xiao Yan could clearly sense a chill being forced out of the jade crystal cabinet. The jade crystal cabinet was instantly covered with cracks. White fog rose from the ground and water vapor filled the air. Hu! Elder Wang inhaled a deep breath of air. The Origin Emperor coiled around his right hand. Suddenly, he shattered the cracked jade cabinet and took out the jade bottle. This jade bottle can withstand the cold of the frigid underworld water. It is not an ordinary item either. You must remember this. This thing is too powerful. You must use it carefully. Xiao Yan nodded. He covered the Origin Monarch Qi in his hand and took the jade bottle. Instantly, a piercingly cold feeling passed through the jade bottle and touched his palm. The intense cold caused even Xiao Yan to tremble. After carefully keeping the jade bottle, Xiao Yan's heart suddenly felt heavy. He didn't know if his previous thoughts were right or wrong, but whether or not he could suppress the burning spell's young energy with this jade bottle. After putting the 150,000 spirit origin stone into Xiao Yan's spirit source card, Elder Wang sighed and said, "Although that Star Moon immortal copper is extremely precious, there is only one thing." Back then, Mu Yuyang stood in front of the jade crystal cabinet for a long time, but he still didn't take it out. Xiao Yan nodded quietly when he heard this. For an expert like Mu Yuyang, 100,000 spirit origin stones was naturally nothing. It was all thanks to the Xiao that he dared to exchange for it. Although he did not know what the latter would do, this was clearly not something that Xiao Yan needed to worry about. Elder Wang opened his mouth and watched Xiao Yan leave. However, he still did not say anything. He looked at the top of the hall and shook his head. Although he was a Saint-rank trial participant, his strength and reputation were still a little weak. When he entered the realm in Valley, naturally, someone would tell him. After leaving the Spirit Pavilion, Xiao Yan headed straight to the Heavenly Peak. After exchanging a few words with Su Ziyang, Xiao Yan's desire to cultivate the Yin Scroll intensified. If he could successfully cultivate the Yin Scroll in less than a month's time, he would definitely be able to make up for his lack of grade. The Buddha Fury Fire Lotus would be his final trump card. He would try his best not to use it. The Secret Arts and the third style of the White Tiger Arts on the Yin Scroll were his biggest trump cards. In the deepest part of the inner academy, in a dense forest, clouds lingered. A group of students looked nervously at a space not far away. In front of them, there was a familiar figure. If Xiao Yan was here, he would be able to recognize this person at a glance, Zhuang He. At this moment, Zhuang He's expression was solemn. He was wearing a gorgeous armor that shone with a bright green light. He was also in the same row as Xiao Yan. There were 3 other people, 2 men and 1 woman. All of them had solemn expressions on their faces. The atmosphere here was exceptionally oppressive at this moment. Crack! A long while later, a cracking sound suddenly sounded from the space. It sounded like a bolt from the blue in everyone's ears as they looked towards the sky. Crack! Crack! The spatial crack continued to spread. In the next moment, a lovely cry was emitted from within. At the same time, a black figure leapt out from the space. "I'm so tired." Before the black figure landed on the ground, he shouted loudly. Hearing this, everyone's heart trembled. Under the lead of Zhuang He and the other 2, they all knelt on one knee and said in unison, "Greetings, Captain." All right, get up, Grandpa, seriously. With my strength, what kind of accident would I be afraid of? A lazy voice was heard. Zhuang He and the others hurriedly stood up. The people behind them also stood up and lowered their heads, not daring to look at the person who had come. From the words of Zhuang He and the other captains, they had clearly heard that this captain was the granddaughter of Elder Wu Chongqing. He had a strange personality and could not be judged by common sense. If he was slightly dissatisfied, he would be furious. As captains, they had been beaten up quite a number of times. Zhuang He raised his head and looked. The captain in front of him was tall and slender. His long black hair was casually scattered. He had an extremely beautiful appearance and the space between his brows was extremely beautiful. He had the aura of a man with sharp eyebrows and starry eyes. Combined with his beautiful appearance, it was filled with a wild beauty. The latter crossed his arms over his chest and wore a black soft armor. Due to his training in the illusory spirit realm, some damage had appeared on the black soft armor. A shocking snow-white color was vaguely revealed on his small abdomen. Both of his legs were long and slender, causing Zhuang He to involuntarily swallow a mouthful of saliva. "Brother Wu, don't say that. The elder is also concerned about your safety. Anyone who comes out of the illusory spirit realm is basically extremely tired. This forest is filled with ferocious beasts." The only female captain among the 4 laughed lightly when she heard that. Although Wu Shaoqi was a female, her character was closer to a male. "Brother Wu," this was what she had requested. "Where's Lu Xiangyang?" Wu Shaoqi snorted and suddenly looked at Zhuang He. Her voice was hollow. "Didn't that guy say that he wanted to fight me? I came out of illusory spirit realm. Where is he?" A trace of ruthlessness flashed across Zhuang He's eyes when he heard this, and he said with a smile on his face, "Captain, let's put Captain Lu aside for now. When you entered illusory spirit realm, there was a Saint-rank trial participant in the academy." "Saint-rank trial participant?" Wu Shaoqi's beautiful eyes flashed a trace of shock, then she said excitedly, "Is it the same Saint-rank trial participant as Mu Yuyang? Where is it? Quickly bring me to take a look." When Zhuang He heard this, he was secretly delighted. Just as he was about to add fuel to the fire, the girl who spoke earlier smiled and said, "Brother Wu, you just came out of illusory spirit realm. Rest for a few days first. Furthermore, the inner court elders have already decided that the inner courtyard competition will be held in 24 days. At that time, it won't be too late to have a showdown with the Saint-rank trial participant." When Wu Shaoqi heard this, her excited mood instantly calmed down. She rubbed her chin and said in a serious manner, "That's right. Although I am full of energy right now, the Saint-rank trial participant is not weak either. When the competition begins, I will take a good look at this Saint-rank trial participant. Zhuang He's expression changed when he heard this. He hurriedly said, Captain, according to what I know, there are many people who wish to challenge the Saint-rank trial participant during the competition. At that time, if this guy is defeated by someone, then it won't be Captain's turn to attack. Wu Shaoqi opened her eyes wide and looked at Zhuang He. She snorted and said, that would only mean that this Saint-rank trial participant is weak. If that's the case, it would be meaningless to defeat him now. Qiner, lead the way. I want to go back and have a good sleep. I have been exhausted to death these days. The woman who had spoken earlier nodded with a smile and left with Wu Shaoqi. Behind them, Zhuang He's expression was extremely ugly. It was a long while before he exhaled. He waved his hand and led the dozens of students behind him to follow. Second place in the Soaring Dragon ranking, no, first place in a month's time. Wu Shaoqi has come out. Zhuang He had just taken a few steps when he heard Wu Shaoqi's excited cheers in front of him. The former clenched his teeth and the coldness in his eyes became even more intense. One above the heavenly peak, the clouds were dense, like a paradise. At the peak of the mountain, there was a majestic courtyard. Xiao Yan was sitting cross-legged on a bluestone, and in front of him was a jade bottle that was as black as ink. Endless cold qi was emitted from it, and the surrounding plants and vegetation were covered in a layer of frost. Xuan and Kai Lin stood in the distance. The two girls' expressions were filled with worry. Xiao Yan had also explained this matter to them. They were naturally clear about the danger involved. Despite this, the two girls could not say anything in the face of Xiao Yan's insistence on cultivating. They could only put down their cultivation and focus all their attention on guarding Xiao Yan, just in case. Xiao Yan's fingers swept across the jade bottle, and his expression gradually calmed down. On his finger, an extreme coldness instantly spread out, causing his blood to freeze a little. Buzz! Xiao Yan's brows furrowed, and the origin monarch qi in his body began to surge. It flowed through his limbs and bones like crazy. At the same time, he began to dredge his meridians. The circulation route of the burning spell was also buzzing, accompanied by obscure and incomprehensible scriptures. On the corresponding meridians, waves of heat quickly spread out. The origin monarch qis within seemed to be burning. Swoosh! Xiao Yan inhaled a deep breath of air. He moved his 10 fingers and started to form a seal according to the introduction on the Yin scroll. His 10 fingers were flashing at a strange angle. In just a moment, the seal had been formed. Boom! The moment the seals were formed, Xiao Yan's face suddenly turned red. His clothes exploded with a loud bang, and wisps of white mist emerged from his red skin. The green stones that were sitting cross-legged were melting at a speed visible to the naked eye. The surrounding plants were burning themselves without any wind, turning into ashes and dissipating. The two girls were startled when they saw Xiao Yan's appearance. Fortunately, both of them were people who had experienced great storms and waves. Faced with such a situation, they did not rashly attack. Their expressions were anxious as they looked at Xiao Yan. They involuntarily clenched their fists, and traces of perspiration had already appeared on their pretty faces. Xiao Yan's eyes were tightly shut. His skin was scarlet red. The scene within his body was even more spectacular. At this moment, the burning spell was like a furious lion, crazily eroding the trace of yin qi that was condensed by Xiao Yan's hand seal. The majestic origin monarch qi was like an endless flame, wrapping around the thread of yin qi. The yin qi was like a flame in a fierce wind, about to be extinguished at any moment. As for the changes in the burning spell, the Xiao wouldn't be of much help. He could only try his best to suppress the violent movement of the monarch flame. Ever since the burning spell appeared in the fighting qi continent, it had a very deep connection with Xiao Yan. In addition, every time Xiao Yan swallowed the heavenly flame, he would use the power of the burning spell. Over time, the burning spell naturally had a connection with the heavenly flame. As the 23 heavenly flames condensed into chaos great monarch flames, the burning spell also had a connection with the monarch flame. When faced with the appearance of the yin qi, the characteristic of extreme yang of the burning spell erupted immediately. If it wasn't for the Xiao deliberately suppressing it, the monarch flame would have already acted on its own. At that time, it would bring even more trouble to Xiao Yan. Enduring the burning sensation in his body, Xiao Yan opened his eyes abruptly and shattered the jade bottle with his palm. In an instant, an endless cold air spread out, freezing all the plants around Xiao Yan into ice drags. Even though they were some distance away from Xiao Yan, Xuan and Xuan still felt a chill that seeped into their bones. Immediately, they began to circulate the Origin Monarch Qi. Only then did they feel a little better. Xiao Yan suddenly inhaled a breath of cold air the moment the jade bottle shattered. The might of this cold, deep water had completely exceeded his imagination. His body had been frozen and even his blood seemed to have stopped flowing. Xiao Yan's face was stiff, and he was enduring endless pain. His body was being ravaged by the power of the burning spell, and his body was experiencing the cold of the cold, dark water. The baptism of ice and fire had almost made him faint. Mr. Xiao Yan, Xuan couldn't help but exclaim when she saw Xiao Yan being frozen into an ice man. They felt extremely uncomfortable even standing there. It was imaginable how much pain Xiao Yan was suffering in the center. Kai Lin also had a solemn expression. Anxiety kept flashing in her beautiful eyes. Although she was anxious in her heart, there was nothing she could do like Xuan. She could only hope that Xiao Yan could survive by himself. As if she had sensed the young energy within Xiao Yan's body, the cold air that drifted out surged towards Xiao Yan and instantly froze him into a block of ice. Not only his skin, but even his blood was frozen. Controlling Xiao Yan's body, the icy cold energy began to flow into his body through his skin. As an extremely yin object, it seemed to have sensed the extreme yang energy within Xiao Yan's body and suddenly surged upwards. Although the trace of yin energy that was condensed in Xiao Yan's body was resisting with all his strength, it was still crushed by the burning spell's energy. In the blink of an eye, there were still traces of whirlpools left. Right at this moment, an endless amount of cold energy suddenly surged into Xiao Yan's body, and instantly shattered the burning spell's extreme yang energy. Buzz! A loud sound was suddenly heard from within his body. Xiao Yan's rigid face suddenly moved. Both of his eyes turned red as he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. Before the blood even landed on the ground, it had already been frozen into ice. Xiao Yan's vision became blurry. Vaguely, he could feel the strength of the burning spell in his body increasing crazily. It was fighting against the icy cold qi in his body. The two forces collided with each other like two earth-shattering rocks, treating Xiao Yan's body as a battlefield and eroding him without any restraint. The burning spell's power was endless, and the cold energy was also pouring into his body. The two extreme yin and yang energies were corroding his body. Xiao Yan endured the unbearable pain. His body was covered with ice, and the heat was unbearable. In this muddle-headed situation, 6 hours had passed in the blink of an eye. Xuan and Kai Lin were so nervous that they didn't dare to move at all. They watched Xiao Yan roar in a low voice at the beginning until he passed out. Even so, the two of them still maintained their calm and didn't disturb Xiao Yan. Whether they could survive or not depended on Xiao Yan's own will. Kai's sister Lin, the temperature seems to have risen again. Xuan suddenly spoke, causing the tensed Kai Lin to be stunned. She looked around and tried to disperse the Origin Monarch Qi around her. After carefully feeling it, the temperature was much warmer than before. The cold underworld water has actually been used up. I wonder if the power of the burning spell has weakened. Kai Lin's beautiful eyes stared at Xiao Yan nervously as she muttered to herself. Within Xiao Yan's body, the Xiaoao was also covered in sweat as it hid within the monarch flame. Feeling the battle that had just dispersed in the outside world, even he was frightened. In the previous battle, the monarch flame had become restless. If he hadn't used his full strength to suppress it, he would have shattered the cold dark water a long time ago. But now, the cold dark water had been completely devoured. The originally powerful burning spell had become much weaker now. With a change of expression, the Xiaoao sensed that the yin qi was hiding within an inconspicuous qi paths of Xiao Yan, and was trembling. It chuckled. The Xiaoao muttered to itself, "This fellow's luck is pretty good. Now that the yang energy has been greatly reduced, it might be able to successfully fuse the yin and yang together." In the outside world, Xiao Yan's eyes slowly opened. His face was extremely pale. The blood at the corner of his mouth was only left with a faint imprint due to the frost. Due to the torment of the ice and fire, countless densely packed cracks had appeared on his skin. If one looked carefully, it was extremely frightening. Xiao Yan did not have time to pay attention to the pain in his body at this moment. After moving his mind slightly, he immediately looked into his body. When he sensed the power of the burning spell, Xiao Yan was immediately overjoyed. His movements became much bigger, and a sharp pain was transmitted from his wound. Xiao Yan coldly inhaled a breath of air, and his face twitched. Even though this was the case, his eyes were filled with incomparable excitement. As long as yin and yang merged together, he would be able to cultivate the secret arts on the yin scroll without any worries. The pain he had suffered today was worth it. After relaxing for a while, Xiao Yan held back the pain in his body. Once again, he performed a hand seal and formed it. The surrounding origin monarch qis immediately roared and surged into his body. With the help of certain meridians, they continuously flowed into a dark vortex in Xiao Yan's body. Very quickly, this vortex began to rotate crazily. Wisps of yin qi flowed out and invaded the burning spell's strongest force. At this moment, in Xiao Yan's trance, it was as if he could see two forces competing against each other. The two forces were like yin and yang, constantly devouring and merging with each other. In the beginning, the white represented the yang energy that occupied the entire sphere. As the vortex grew stronger, the black color began to slowly grow. Due to the huge consumption of energy, the intense energy of the burning spell was unable to suppress the black part. Soon, the black part caught up to them. It occupied half of the territory. Wang! About an hour later, Xiao Yan's body suddenly let out a buzzing sound that shook his nerves. In the next moment, it sounded like immortal music was echoing. Like 100 birds facing a phoenix, an indescribable and pleasant sound came out from Xiao Yan's body. Although the sound wasn't loud, it had a peculiar vibration. The clouds above Heavenly Peak were scattered, and this strange sound was transmitted to the 9 heavens. It was like the sound of 10,000 spirits, a majestic atmosphere. The first elder of the Yunluo Academy slowly opened his turbid eyes in a dark room under the Heaven Pillar Peak. His eyes seemed to be able to see through the dark tunnel. Myriad Tao spirit voice, yin and yang as one. The first elder muttered to himself. His eyebrows were lowered. After a moment of silence, Xu Zhoufang said in a low voice, "It can't be Mu Yuyang." This feeling of yin and yang merging together. It's much stronger than him. Who is it? In the technique impartation hall, Su Ziyang raised his brows. A trace of doubt flashed across his eyes. This feeling made him feel strange. Although he had a strange feeling, he had no idea what had happened. Realm and Valley. A huge mountain peak soared into the sky like a sharp sword, and it was filled with a majestic aura. In the middle of the mountain peak, a handsome young man wearing a green robe was strolling in the forest. The young man had sword-shaped eyebrows and starry eyes. His face was as warm as jade, and his black hair was like a waterfall. He was tall and straight, and he looked extremely elegant. His eyes seemed to have stars flowing in them, and they were flickering with a terrifying light. Suddenly, the young man's sword-like brows furrowed slightly. He raised his head and looked at the sky, and didn't speak for a long time. What was that strange feeling just now? Almost at the same time, some of the powerful elders of Yunluo Academy sensed it, but none of them could clearly sense it. As for a third-grade elder like Elder Fang, he didn't sense it at all. Buzz. At this moment, within Xiao Yan's origin monarch crystal, there seemed to be a pair of yin and yang fish rotating slowly. The two fish were like a millstone, separated by yin and yang. They were clearly separated, but every time they rotated, the yin and yang fish would merge for a split second, mutually reinforcing each other, and harmonize with yin and yang. This was the true essence of yin and yang. Although Xiao Yan was not very clear about this so-called yin and yang energy, he could clearly feel an unprecedented energy surging out from his body. This energy was completely different from the previous energy. It was unyielding and mixed with gentleness. The growth of his strength wasn't as simple as 1 + 1. Hong! Xiao Yan's eyes suddenly opened. In an instant, a stream of essence rushed out from the top of his head. It was a beam of light that pierced through the sky. A huge force exploded, causing plants to fly everywhere, and even the limestone was turned into dust. Xuanur and Kai Lin were also blasted out by the enormous force. They hurriedly used the origin monarch qi before stopping. When the dust in front of them scattered, they saw a blurry human figure a short distance away. Only then did the hearts of the two girls, which were raised in their throats and eyes, drop. Xiao Yan stood up with great effort. The injuries on his body had already healed. His clothes were ragged and there were not many pieces of cloth on his body. His hair was disheveled and his face was dirty. Clenching his fists, Xiaoyan suddenly felt an endless stream of energy coming from every part of his body. The energy that was much stronger than before suddenly emerged. Xiaoyan's sparkling eyes gradually calmed down, and he clenched his fists tightly. A heroic feeling suddenly emerged in his heart. Roar! All of a sudden, Xiaoyan raised his head to the sky and let out a long roar. He let out all the turbid energy in his body. Along with this roar, cracking sounds came from within Xiaoyan's body. The yin and yang energy gathered in his abdomen quickly spread throughout his entire body. It seems like I have succeeded. Kai Lin smiled slightly when she saw Xiaoyan's action. However, her heart had relaxed quite a bit. Even she felt a wave of panic when she saw what happened just now. That's great. Xuan revealed a tempting smile. She put her hands together in front of her chest and took a breath. Xiaoyan's appearance just now almost made her dizzy. A long while later, Xiaoyan's roar finally gradually faded. That carefree and dripping feeling was as though he had obtained an outlet to vent his emotions. He had obtained the most perfect outlet to vent his emotions. The energy flowing within his body was incomparably vigorous. It was much more abundant than before. Moreover, there was an additional trace of gentleness within his origin monarch chi. Although it was not as sharp as before, it was even more powerful. Mr. Xiaoyan, how is it? Xuan ran over happily, looking at Xiaoyan with anticipation. Xiao turned his head and saw Kai Lin slowly walking over with a smile on her face. If I were to take Bai Yangchao's original six-shattering heaven spear again, I would be able to shatter it with one punch. Xiaoyan raised his fist and said with a smile. Xuan and Kai Lin were surprised when they heard this, and then they revealed joyful expressions. Although Xiaoyan had also used his strong body to block Bai Yangchao's 6 heaven-splitting spears, he had used a lot of strength. His palm had also cracked. Now, his strength had actually reached such an extent. I now have a rough idea. At that time, Bai Yangchao didn't use his full strength. However, even if he used all of his strength, I can still be fearless of him. Xiaoyan withdrew his smile and said in a deep voice. But it is still not enough to be stronger than him. Lu Xiangyang's strength is definitely far greater than Bai Yangchao's. I am still not clear about his strength. There is also Mu Yiyue. These two fellows are the ones who will challenge me in this competition. Listening to Xiaoyan's low and deep voice, Xuan and Kai Lin looked at each other. They could see endless joy in each other's eyes. Xiaoyan had only been in Yunluo Academy for a few days, but he already had a strength that far exceeded Bai Yangchao's. This ability. Indeed, he had the prestige of the Flame Emperor of Fighting Qi Continent. Mr. Xiaoyan, besides Lu Xiangyang and Mu Yiyue, you have another opponent. Xuan smiled gently and looked at Xiaoyan's body. She couldn't help but blush and turn her head unnaturally. Kai Lin also gritted her teeth when she saw this. She turned her head and did not look at Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan was stunned. He looked at his own body and could not help but laugh softly. He took out a black robe from his storage ring and put it on. He teased, "You are already my old wife. What is there to be shy about?" Kai Lin heard that and snorted. She gritted her teeth and said, "Rogue." Xuan small face was red and did not say anything. Xiaoyan smiled bitterly and shook his head. He then looked at Xuan and softly said, "That person is the Soaring Dragon ranking 2nd place." Xuan nodded with a red face and said softly, "That's right. Her name is Wu Xiaoqi. She is the granddaughter of Elder Wu Chongqing. She has extraordinary talent. She entered the illusory spirit realm to cultivate a long time ago. I don't know what level she has reached now. Moreover, even Mu Yiyue was somewhat afraid of Wu Xiaoqi's strength." Quote,